right, here we go. So we're going to do a little real estate podcast here. Going to be at what's really happening in the local market right now. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? We have Matt Greenland here with Greenland International. Is that the name?
Yeah, Matthew Greenland with Greenland Group International, brokered with Keller Williams Island Life. I'm a realtor in Venice, Florida, and we operate a small management company as well.
Okay, awesome. I'm Connor Hancock with Community Lending based in Fort Myers. Local lender. I live in Sarasota. Our office is down in Fort Myers. I specialize in VA loans, but I could do any kind of loan that you can possibly think of. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to get together today and do 5 separate segments about what's happening in the real estate market. Segment 1 today is going to be, just like I said, it's going to be what's really happening in our local market. What I did is I came up with an opening prompt or question, and it's so the question is, everyone sees headlines in the media. But what are we actually seeing in the market right now in the trenches in the real estate market? So the first question that I have for you is, what are you seeing right now in terms of buyer activity? Are showings up, flat, or down?
I think if the property is priced accurately, that everybody's seeing a lot of showings right now.
Yeah.
I've hosted a couple open houses, and they have been extremely busy compared to the last year or so.
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of leading into that, are homes sitting a little bit longer than they were, say, like a year ago?
I actually believe that the market is better now
Yeah.
than this time last year.
Yeah.
If you're priced right and have the right marketing strategy, then your property is going to sell.
So what about the price point? Because I know that you see a lot of stuff about median price is down a little bit. What price point do you think is kind of moving the quickest, as opposed to homes that are actually sitting on the market for a long time?
Well, for a while there, anything over $1 million was not impacted by the economy, wasn't impacted by interest rates, so those were moving. Right now, I would say, talking about a single family home, anywhere from 300 to 700. Those are the average buyer
kind of the
out
sweet
there.
spot.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. What's interesting is kind of getting off this question a little bit, just talking about, price points and everything. So, you guys mainly look at price points, $300,000 home, 400,000, 500,000. We look at loan sizes. So you may have people that put 20% down. So we're not getting paid, essentially on the full purchase price. So we're looking at loan amount.
Okay.
But what's interesting though is because, and you'd think it would be just the opposite, as prices went up over the last few years. And I know this has happened to some other loan officers, the average loan amount has actually gone down.
Yep.
Which is a little bit surprising, but I guess if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Is that people don't want a higher payment because of increased taxes, insurance, interest rates, so they put more money down. So that's kind of interesting that's changed. What about inventory now? How has that changed over the last say 1 to 2 years?
There is less inventory on the market now than there was at the end of end of last year, middle of last year. And, we're in Florida, so we get a big swing during those seasonal months.
Yeah.
And, December is when everybody starts getting them back on the market. And, right now there's a lot of inventory out there.
Yeah. So what would you say? Because in my view, inventory has obviously increased. But, we had, if you look at pre-COVID versus now, it's not that dramatically different. I mean, part of the problem was, we had so little inventory post-COVID. That was a time where you had just an insane amount of people coming to the market, buying pretty much anything they could see sight unseen, waiving inspections. They were buying from out of state without even seeing the property. So that drove inventory down to nothing. We've had a surge back in inventory, but current inventory is only about 5.2 months. I mean, it really depends on, you said in Venice, it's
6.875.
Okay, so it's
right
a little
now.
bit higher there.
Yep.
But I mean, would you consider that pretty close to normal?
Yeah, we're definitely back to a healthier market. From 22 to 23, beginning of 23, it was still kind of that COVID craze, COVID market. And then as we leaked into the summer, things really started to slow down dramatically.
Yeah.
But whenever the government's printing money, interest rates are super low, and you have this desire to live in paradise and not have to navigate through some of those COVID restrictions.
Yeah.
It's not hard to imagine that would be the outcome.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. So in my view, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before we got on air here, but if you look at the makeup of inventory, you've got single-family homes, you've got condos, you've got townhomes, and you've got duplexes and everything in between. But we've had a surge in inventory in, say, condos, single-family homes to a much lesser extent, and that's one of the reasons why people have kind of navigated towards new construction to some extent. But how do you think that makeup kind of affects what buyers are looking at, and even the price point is as well that they're getting into?
Well, I mean, if you look at the whole market, just as a whole, you're including all different property styles. It's kind of hard to figure out what is exactly going on with the market.
Yeah,
Now, if you look at condos right now, it's a tough game.
yeah,
Assessments were crazy, insurance has gone up, association costs, and the first thing that happens when all of the ownership costs go up, the value decreases just
yep,
to make it to make it work, and
yeah,
that's what's happened in the condo market.
hmm,
And it's I would say things are getting better.
hmm,
The hurricane really impacted us. We're getting, we're seeing rates coming down. I think this time next year, and don't hold me to this, but I think at
no, we're
least in
going
my
to.
area, I would say confidently somewhere between an 8 to 12% increase in the condo market.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's getting a little bit better too. But we have, and I think in segment two, maybe or segment three, we're going to talk about this a little bit about buyer psychology, kind of what they think about the market. But every time I get a client to come to me, they're scared, they're fearful about the market. They think the inventory is kind of out of control. But once they get out there and they start looking at homes, there are homes that are sitting on the market. So the time that a home sits on a market is getting dramatically longer than it was 3 or 4 years ago when the market was really hot. But if you think about, and I read this somewhere, they said, yeah, we've got a lot more inventory, but we essentially have the wrong kind of inventory. And that, in my opinion, that means that you got a lot of, got a lot of condos, you have a lot of townhomes, you don't have enough existing single family homes, you got a ton of new construction coming on the market. But if you want that existing home with a pool, with all the upgrades already there, the yard's already done, flower bed's already done, then you just don't have a lot of selection out there right now. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
Convenience is key.
Yeah.
So if something's already done and the price is right, that's going to be more appealing to a larger consumer basis.
Yeah.
Whereas, most people don't want to go in and remodel something. The contracting process can be difficult, as we all know. So yeah, I mean, if it's turnkey furnished in a great neighborhood, priced right,
Yep.
and remodeled, you're going to have probably 100, 200% more people interested in that
Yeah.
property just because it's ready to go.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's what I tell people. But I like to say it to begin with because I want to get their reaction to when I say we need more inventory. Because you hear what's happened in the market, and you hear that homes are just sitting there. I've had realtors that say I had an open house last weekend and no one showed up. And they say it's extremely frustrating. The market's dead, and I tell people, I'm like, okay, well, this, I don't know if this is a very good analogy or not, but you go to a grocery store, you go in the cereal aisle, you have 2 boxes of cereal, and that's it, 2 different kinds. Most people are going to look at that and go, no, I don't like either one of those. I'm not going to buy it. I don't care what the price is. It's not what I want. But you take a look at a house and you go, okay, if I want to live in a certain neighborhood and there's only 2 houses for sale out of like 400 within that neighborhood, probably not going to buy unless it's exactly what I want. So we essentially need more inventory, more selection, which is going to stabilize prices and give people options to buy. So I think that's kind of what we're faced with right now. We have a ton of new construction, but people may not want that because you've got to put in all the upgrades, all the options, the yard, the curtains, the shutters. So we need more existing single-family homes, and I think that's really going to open up the market.
Right. Well, Florida is primarily, secondary homes and investment properties.
Yeah.
So, when things get rough, and get more expensive, they're the first properties that go up for sale.
Yeah.
And a lot of those properties aren't something that somebody's going to trade up to or downsize to.
No.
And that's where
They're
that gap's
investment
coming
properties
from.
for rental income. That's
Bingo.
it. Yeah, not
Yep.
for
And
primary.
then once you start, once you start to hemorrhage cash,
Yeah.
then you're dropping prices and you're
Yep.
competing with your neighbors, and basically it's a race to the lowest price and things until things get a little bit more healthy. And that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah, and that's that's the solution with more inventory, and more what people want to buy is it's going to have price stability, give people different options to what they want to buy. So, so we have the last question here. So keep in mind these segments are going to be pretty short. They're going to be covered different things, but we really want to talk about kind of what's happening in the market, about inventory, what impact that's having, and what kind of inventory we're having. So the last thing that I have in this segment one that we have, is if someone is thinking of listing a house in the next 90 days, and this is going to be a good one here. I like talking about this. What should they know if they're thinking about listing their house? If you have a listing appointment, what conversation do you have with somebody?
Well, I would say, market
price expectations.
Yeah, market conditions are important. When I used to go in and price out a house, we would look at actives, we look at pendings, we look at solds, and you'd work out figures on a combination of all those.
Yeah.
Now I don't even look at I mean, I look at them, but I don't base the pricing off of that. I base it off of what is sold in the last 90 to 120 days.
It's got to be tough in this market too, because there haven't been so many purchases or sales that you can really kind of gauge what the price should be. So kind of getting off a little topic now, but I'm kind of thinking about what I would ask. So how do you come up with a price then, suggested price, if there hasn't been a recent sell? I mean, do you just kind of based on your experience around the area and kind of what things you just, even if it's 5 miles away and it's sold within the last 6 months, you just go, okay, the market's done this.
Right. Well, being a local expert is huge, and not to blow anybody, at the knees, or take anybody out at the knees. People that try to service a massive area, when you run into a situation like that, it's almost impossible to know the market intently enough to be able to price it out.
That's true. That's a good point.
So just being hyper-focused in a small area, I had to price out a property out in Northport. It was a basic 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a pool on a canal, with a massive workshop. Brick block building, brand new roof, and the only comparable property that I could find was I think 8 to 10 miles away.
Yeah.
And being in Port Charlotte to Northport, they're very similar areas. Mm-hmm. So we were able to price that accurately. Yeah. Property went under contract within 6 days on the market.
Yeah. Yeah, and for everyone watching too, if you're a buyer thinking about buying, or even a seller thinking about selling your home, so kind of like Matt was saying, it's very important that you work with somebody that's local. Me as a lender, I do the whole state of Florida. We have some loan officers that do the multiple states, the whole country. I focus on Florida because that's it's enough business for me, and I know the market very well. But if I have a buyer that comes to me, I refer it to someone like Matt. If they're looking to buy in Venice, I know that he knows that area very well, so I send them to you because, you definitely have to work with somebody that knows that local market. But, and we may get into this in one of the other segments, but just to kind of touch on it real quick, if you're a seller looking to list your property, keep in mind that there are things that we can do, not only as a realtor helping to negotiate certain terms of the deal, but as a lender, we can do certain things like a 1-year rate buy down for the first year paid by the lender, or 1% flex cash. Some of these deals that we do can be combined with a seller credit as well. So this is a huge incentive in this market to help move a listing, and it's a massive incentive to a buyer that is concerned about affordability issues. Or, I had another realtor that said, hey, I've got this client that he wants to buy, but he said, look, I don't want to buy a house and then have it drop 10 grand within the next 6 months. And he's like, what do I say? And it's like, well, it's a perfect environment now to give them incentive to buy this now. That's why we negotiate with the seller up front to take care of that potential price drop in the future, which I don't think is going to happen, but it kind of takes that fear away.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a tough decision to make, especially if it's your primary residence.
Yeah.
Looking 6 months out, a year out on a home purchase is probably not logical.
Yeah.
I think the average amount of time that somebody keeps the house is 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
But you have a 30-year mortgage. So markets go up, they go down. If you like the house and it's at a good price, buy it.
Yeah. Totally agree. So, okay, awesome. Well, I think that wraps up segment 1. That was really good stuff. So, not sure. I think next segment we're going to talk about buyer psychology. So that's going to be a good one.
Let's do it.
Awesome.